My name is Elaine Parker, and the afternoon North Star Industrial Systems honored my 40 years of service was the afternoon I finally understood how loudly an empty chair could speak. The ballroom in downtown Columbus held nearly 400 people, employees, retirees, city officials, teachers, and community partners filled the round tables beneath soft amber lights. North Star was celebrating its 60th anniversary. But the company had also turned part of the event into my retirement ceremony. I had asked for something modest. Rebecca Sloan, our CEO, had smiled and told me that 4 decades did not qualify as modest. My husband, George, sat on my left. His silver-handled cane rested against his knee, and his hand covered mine whenever the applause became too much. On my right stood a chair bearing a white place card. Colin Parker. My only son. The doors closed at 2 o'clock. The musicians lowered their instruments. The lights dimmed. The chair remained empty. I did not ask anyone to wait. A room full of people had given me their afternoon, and I would not make them watch a mother bargain with a promise her son had already broken. I simply lifted Colin's place card, straightened it, and set it back down. At 68, I had learned how to remain composed through layoffs, equipment failures, and hospital waiting rooms. None of that training prepared me for seeing my son's name in front of an unused chair. Anger would have been simpler. Anger gives you something to hold. What I felt instead was recognition. Colin had not abandoned me in one dramatic moment. We had reached that chair through years of postponed dinners, shortened calls, and my own repeated assurance that I understood. Near the rear of the ballroom stood Owen Bennett. His navy suit was old enough to remember several weddings and at least one funeral. But it had been carefully pressed. I had asked him to sit with us. He had quietly refused. "That seat belongs to your family," he had said. So he remained at the back with the educators and nonprofit guests. As if he were uncertain he belonged among executives. Yet when our eyes met, he smiled and placed one hand over his heart. He had shown up. 3 large screens came alive with photographs from my career, a 28-year-old woman in safety glasses, a younger George holding our toddler at a company picnic, teams of apprentices standing beside machines they had learned to repair. The images moved faster than memory. 40 years became 6 minutes of music, laughter, and faces I had loved. Then Rebecca walked to the podium. "Today," she said, "we are honoring not only Elaine Parker's service, but the kind of service she believes should continue after her retirement." She introduced North Star's Legacy in Action Fund, administered independently through the Central Ohio Community Foundation. I knew the fund well. I also knew that 3 months earlier I had submitted one name for consideration and removed myself from every discussion that followed. What I did not know was whether that person had been selected. Rebecca opened a folder. After an independent review of community impact, financial stewardship, and 20 years of educational service, the board has approved its first 5-year Legacy in Action grant. Owen stopped smiling. "Owen Bennett," Rebecca announced, "please join us on stage." He looked behind him, as though another man with his name might be standing there. People began to applaud. Slowly, Owen walked down the center aisle, passing the empty chair he had refused to take. Rebecca waited until he reached the stage. "The total commitment," she said, "is $720,000. The ballroom seemed to inhale all at once. Owen's face lost its color. My own knees weakened. I had expected a meaningful grant if he was chosen, but nothing close to that amount. Rebecca explained that the award would support scholarships, robotics equipment, student transportation, and a personal educator honorarium. It was not a suitcase of money. And it was not mine to give. It was a carefully governed investment in work Owen had already spent half his life doing. Still, he turned toward me with tears in his eyes. "Why me?" I took his hand. "Because your mother is why I first looked out for you," I said, "but the man you became is why they chose you." The audience rose. George stood with his cane. Behind him, Colin's empty chair entered the edge of North Star's livestream camera. No one pointed toward the empty chair. No one needed to. By the time George and I reached home that evening, a short clip had spread far beyond the company page. My phone showed 112 notifications, including 27 missed calls. Most were from Colin and his wife. Brooke. When Colin called again, I answered. Mom, he said, breathless, why didn't you tell me about the $720,000? Long before my retirement became a video strangers shared online, I was simply a woman trying to build a stable life without letting my family see how hard I was working to hold it together. I joined North Star in 1986 as a quality control technician. I was 28, one of 4 women on a production floor filled with men who assumed I would leave as soon as I had another child. Instead, I learned every machine I was permitted to touch, asked questions after everyone else had gone home, and took evening classes at a community college. George was a guidance counselor at a public high school. He never earned a large salary, but he possessed a rare patience. On nights when I had class, he warmed dinner, helped Colin with homework, and waited for me at the kitchen table with coffee. We were not poor, but nearly every dollar had a destination. We drove cars until repairs cost more than dignity. We spent summer vacations at state parks and called them adventures. When Colin was accepted into a competitive high school program, I declined a promotion in Texas because moving would have taken him away from teachers who believed in him. I never told him what I had refused. I also did the ordinary work, no resume records. I signed permission slips before dawn, sat beside Colin through asthma attacks, remembered which teacher needed calling, and kept birthday cupcakes level while driving across town after a 10-hour shift. George carried his share, but our son came to see my reliability as something natural, almost like electricity, always present, noticed mainly when it failed. That became the pattern of our family. George and I protected Colin from the cost of his own security. We saved through a 529 college plan, accepted overtime, repaired our own roof, and treated every sacrifice as private information. We wanted our son to feel safe, not indebted. For many years, he was grateful without needing to know the numbers. He called after college exams. He came home for Sunday dinner. He remembered my birthday and sent George ridiculous Father's Day cards. The distance did not arrive as cruelty. It arrived as convenience. First came a promotion that required longer hours. Then came a mortgage, professional dinners, and weekends planned months in advance. Each new responsibility sounded reasonable by itself. That was how I excused the pattern. I kept measuring Colin by the loving boy he had been, while ignoring the adult choices he was making. 6 years before my retirement, George suffered a mild stroke while trimming a hedge. Colin drove to the hospital before the ambulance doors had fully closed. For several weeks, he brought groceries, organized medications, and called every evening. Then George began walking again. I returned to work. The immediate danger passed. Colin's calls became weekly, then every other week, then occasional. Visiting forced him to see his father's cane and the tremor that appeared when George was tired. I think it also forced him to see the lines deepening around my eyes. Avoiding our aging became easier than admitting he was afraid of losing us. I recognized his fear. Brooke did not create that distance, although she benefited from it. She had grown up moving between rentals after her parents lost their house. Security, to her, meant a full calendar, a growing account, and a life that looked successful from the outside. When Colin said we were fine, she believed him. And I kept helping them believe it. Don't worry about us, I would say. We understand. Next weekend is fine. Birthdays became text messages. Sunday dinners became promises to reschedule. I accepted every apology before Colin had to sit with the discomfort of disappointing me. Strong mothers are often praised for needing very little. Over time, the praise can become a convenient excuse. I had made competence look so effortless that even the people who loved me forgot effort was involved. George noticed what I was doing. Patience is one thing, he told me one evening. Teaching him that nothing hurts you is another. I said I did not want our son visiting out of guilt. In the spare bedroom closet, 3 old storage boxes held the history I had hidden: financial papers, photographs, school projects, and cards written in Colin's childhood handwriting. George once suggested that Colin was old enough to understand what his life had required from ours. I refused. If he knows we need him, he'll come because he feels trapped, I said. George looked toward the dark kitchen window. Maybe one day, he answered. He should understand that being needed isn't the same as being trapped. 3 months before my retirement, Rebecca Sloan asked me to meet her in the conference room overlooking North Star's original production floor. On the table lay a folder from the Central Ohio Community Foundation and a single nomination form. The Legacy in Action Fund is ready to make its first major commitment, she said. The foundation wants you to recommend someone whose work reflects what you intended this fund to become. I had helped establish the fund 12 years earlier, but I had insisted from the beginning that North Star employees could not treat it as a private reward system. Every recipient had to survive independent financial review, conflict screening, and an evaluation of measurable community impact. Only one name came to mind: Owen Bennett. I submitted his name along with records from East River Technical High School, graduation outcomes, robotics competition results, student retention numbers, letters from parents, and an independent audit of the small nonprofit supporting his program. I disclosed my history with Ruth and Owen, then signed a recusal removing me from all deliberations. The form asked for evidence, not affection. I wrote about attendance rates, students, and graduates entering trades. Owen's kindness explained why I loved him. His work explained why the foundation should trust him. Rebecca promised the decision would remain confidential, even from me. If he is chosen, she said, you will learn when everyone else does. That was how I wanted it. Owen deserved to be judged for the lives he had changed, not for the life his mother had once saved. A week later, I drove to Colin and Brooke's house with 2 engraved invitations. Their home stood in a planned community west of Columbus. All pale brick, trimmed lawns, and matching porch lights. Colin opened the door wearing a headset and held up one finger while finishing a work call. Brooke joined us in the kitchen. I explained that North Star's 60th anniversary gala would include my retirement ceremony. Colin removed his headset and smiled when he saw the invitations. For a moment, he looked like the boy who used to wait at the front window for my car after an evening shift. A framed photograph of the 3 of us at his college graduation stood behind him. I let that familiar face reassure me more than his recent behavior should have. 40 years, he said. Mom, that's incredible. Your father and I would like you both there. Colin looked directly at me. We'll be there. I wouldn't miss it. Brooke asked whether the event would be filmed. I told her North Star planned to livestream it for employees and community partners. She said that sounded impressive, then began discussing what they should wear. I chose to remember Colin's promise instead. The afternoon before the gala, his name appeared on my phone. His voice carried the bright, careful tone he used when delivering news he hoped I would make easy for him. Brooke's largest client had offered them a luxury resort package in Scottsdale. Someone else had cancelled. The suite and spa appointments were covered, but they had to fly the next morning. If they declined, the opportunity disappeared. Tomorrow morning? I asked. Your ceremony isn't until 2, Colin said, but the flight leaves at 9. We could take you and Dad somewhere special next weekend. In the background, Brooke said, tell her it's non-refundable. Colin lowered his voice. We've both been exhausted, Mom. Brooke really needs this. He never asked what I needed. I do not think the omission was deliberate. That almost made it worse. Deliberate cruelty can be confronted. Habitual thoughtlessness hides inside reasonable explanations until the person being hurt begins questioning whether she is allowed to hurt at all. I looked toward the spare bedroom, where the 3 storage boxes sat behind a closed door. I thought about reminding him that he had promised. I thought about saying that I needed him, too. Instead, I reached for the sentence that had protected everyone except me. I understand. When the call ended, George was standing in the hallway with one hand against the wall for balance. Are you all right? He asked. For once, I could not make myself say yes. That evening, I called Owen. The foundation had invited him as an education representative while his program remained under consideration. But he had nearly decided not to attend. Corporate galas made him uncomfortable, and he owned only one suit. Come anyway, I said. Sit with George and me. He became quiet. I can come, he said, but I can't take Colin's chair. I'm not asking you to replace my son. I'm asking for one familiar face in a room full of people celebrating a version of me that never had to go home alone. Owen took a breath. Then I'll be there. I met Ruth Bennett during my second week at North Star. She was a safety inspector with a laugh that carried across the production floor and a habit of correcting supervisors twice her size without raising her voice. She taught me which foreman respected questions, which vending machine stole quarters, and how to secure my hair before leaning near rotating equipment. We became friends before either of us noticed it happening. George and I ate Sunday dinners with Ruth and her husband. Colin and Owen chased each other through our yards, built forts from shipping cartons, and argued over whose turn it was to choose the movie. Ruth never let men erase my work. In 1998, a solvent line ruptured during a maintenance shutdown. The vapor ignited before the alarm sounded. A pressure door struck my shoulder and knocked me behind a steel workbench as smoke swallowed the aisle. Ruth had already reached the emergency corridor when she realized I was missing. She came back. I remember her crawling beneath the smoke, wrapping my arm across her shoulders, and dragging me toward the exit while ceiling panels fell behind us. The doctors later said another minute inside could have caused permanent lung damage. Ruth dismissed every attempt to call her heroic. "You would have come back for me," she always said. I hoped she was right. I was never grateful for the chance to find out. The accident left a pale scar along my shoulder and a fear of enclosed industrial stairwells that lasted for years. Ruth never tried to talk me out of that fear. She simply walked beside me until I could enter them alone. That was her gift. She helped without making the person receiving help feel small. Years later, acute leukemia accomplished what that fire had not. Ruth grew weaker through months of treatment. But she remained more worried about Owen than herself. He was 19, proud, frightened, and pretending he understood how to become an adult without her. During my final visit, Ruth held my wrist. "Don't give him everything," she whispered. "Just don't let him think he has to become a man alone." I promised. After she died, Owen avoided me for almost a year. My voice reminded him of hers. My concern felt like proof that she was gone. I left messages without demanding replies and mailed birthday cards without enclosing money. Eventually, he appeared on our porch carrying a broken toaster he claimed George had asked him to repair. George had made no such request. None of us exposed the excuse. Owen stocked grocery shelves at night, attended community college, and delivered food on weekends. He refused direct financial help. So George and I offered information instead, the name of an honest mechanic, an affordable apartment, a professor willing to recommend him for a scholarship. He earned an engineering degree but discovered that he felt most useful teaching teenagers. He completed Ohio's career and technical education licensing requirements and accepted a position at East River Technical High School. The salary barely covered his loans. The robotics program survived on donated parts and equipment. Owen repaired himself twice. He considered leaving for an engineering firm that offered nearly double his pay. Both times, a student gave him a reason to stay. One was a girl whose family could not afford a competition fee. Owen quietly covered it, then watched her earn an engineering scholarship 2 years later. He kept her thank you note above his desk, not as proof that she owed him, but as a reminder that one timely act could travel farther than the person who began it. When George had his stroke, Owen began visiting every few weeks. He knew George disliked being helped out of a chair. He knew I forgot lunch when I was worried. He knew our coffee maker needed its switch pressed twice and that the back gate swelled after rain. He noticed because he was present. When the foundation contacted him during its review, Owen learned that I had submitted his name. He called me immediately. "People will think this is repayment for what Mom did. Your mother is why I first looked out for you," I said. "Your work is why I submitted the nomination." On the morning of the gala, Owen arrived outside the convention center before George and me. His old navy suit had been pressed, and he carried a small paper bag. Inside was a leather-bound journal. On the first page, he had written, "You taught me that strength is not doing everything alone. It is knowing whose hand to take." For several seconds, I could not speak. Then my phone vibrated. Colin had posted a photograph from Scottsdale. He and Brooke stood beside a blue resort pool, wearing sunglasses and holding tall drinks. The caption read, "Finally taking the break we deserve." The clip that later traveled across social media lasted 58 seconds. It showed Owen's name, the amount of the grant, my hand closing around his, and Colin's empty chair near the edge of the frame. What it did not show was everything that came before. Northstar's anniversary program began with employees telling stories I had never expected to hear publicly. A retired maintenance supervisor recalled a blizzard when I stayed overnight because younger workers were frightened to drive home. An apprentice named Mariah described how our training program had given her a career after 2 colleges had rejected her. A former employee, speaking with her family's permission, explained how Northstar's emergency fund helped when her son needed medical equipment. None of those stories belonged to me alone. Teams had done the work. Committees had approved the money. People had trusted one another. Still, hearing my name attached to their memories made me realize that a career leaves marks its owner may never see. In front sat women I had trained and technicians who entered through apprenticeships. Their presence mattered more than the Crystal Award. Promotions changed my title, they changed my purpose forever. Rebecca then described my own path through Northstar, quality control, night classes, process management, and eventually workforce development. She mentioned the Texas promotion I had declined, but did not say why. George knew. He touched 2 fingers to my wrist. The quiet signal we had used throughout our marriage whenever words might break us open. Colin's chair remained empty beside me. No camera deliberately focused on it. No speaker mentioned him. That restraint made the absence more painful, not less. Everyone else had protected my dignity. My son had assumed I would protect him from the meaning of his choice. When Rebecca invited me to speak about the Legacy in Action Fund, I walked to the podium and looked toward Owen at the rear of the ballroom. I explained that the fund had begun 12 years earlier with portions of retention and performance bonuses I had been offered after a difficult company merger. Northstar matched those contributions, retired executives added their own, and the Community Foundation invested the principal. I had never imagined the first commitment would reach this size. My only condition had been that the money reward work that could continue helping people after the original recipient was gone. I told the audience about Ruth's courage in the fire and the promise I had made before she died. Then I told them the promise had changed over time. At first, I watched over Owen because Ruth asked me to. I said, eventually, I watched because I cared about the man he was becoming. I asked Owen to stand. He did so reluctantly. No one can replace my son. I continued, love is not a chair that only one person may occupy. But Owen has taught me that family can also be built from promises honored over time. Owen lowered his eyes. I did not invite him into Colin's place. And I did not use his loyalty to punish my son. I wanted the room to understand that gratitude did not erase blood. It enlarged the circle around it. The distinction mattered to me. Even if the brief video later allowed strangers to flatten our lives into a contest between 2 men. Only then did Rebecca open the foundation's decision. She explained that I had nominated Owen 3 months earlier, disclosed our relationship, and recused myself. An independent committee had reviewed his school's finances, student outcomes, and program governance. The $720,000 commitment would be distributed across 5 years. The fund's principal would remain intact so future recipients could also be supported. When Owen reached the stage, Rebecca clarified the allocation: an endowed scholarship reserve, laboratory equipment, transportation and summer program support, and a separate educator honorarium. Owen shook his head. I can't accept that much. Rebecca answered gently, today is an announcement, not a transfer. The foundation will complete agreements with you and the school. You will have counsel, oversight, and time to decide. That was when Owen turned toward me and asked why. I gave him the only answer that felt completely true. Your mother is why I first looked out for you. The man you became is why they chose you. The audience stood. George rose with his cane. Owen covered his face for a moment before accepting Rebecca's hand. Northstar posted the clip after the ceremony. Employees shared it first, then teachers, parents, local trade organizations, and a Columbus News account followed. The headline simplified everything into one dramatic sentence. At a resort pool in Scottsdale. Colin's phone lit up with it. Retiring Ohio executive honors late friend's son with $720,000 legacy grant. After the ballroom emptied, a foundation officer led Owen, George, and me into a smaller conference room. Owen still looked as though someone had confused him with a more deserving man. The officer explained the numbers slowly. $400,000 would establish a protected scholarship reserve. $220,000 would purchase robotics equipment and mobile teaching kits. $75,000 would support transportation, competition fees, and summer stipends. The remaining $25,000 was Owen's educator honorarium, subject to the usual tax reporting. The award was not an inheritance, a personal fortune, or the entire Legacy in Action Fund. It was a 5-year commitment backed by foundation distributions and North Star's matching contribution. Owen asked who would select scholarship recipients, whether undocumented expenses required approval, and what would happen if he left East River. The officer explained that the school, foundation, and an independent advisory group would share oversight. Owen would guide the program, but no single person could redirect the money. His relief was visible. He wanted responsibility, not ownership. Owen listened, then asked whether he could decline the personal honorarium and add it to the student fund. "You can," I said, "but you don't have to prove your goodness by remaining exhausted and broke." He admitted that part of his student debt remained and his truck had begun stalling at intersections. We agreed that paying down debt and buying safe transportation would not betray the students he served. Ruth had never wanted her son to confuse suffering with character. Outside the conference room, 2 local reporters requested interviews. North Star's communications director limited questions to the fund and Owen's program. No one discussed Colin, and Rebecca declined to identify the person named on the empty chair. By the time George and I arrived home, the internet had done what the company had refused to do. Viewers had paused the video, enlarged Colin's place card, and found his resort photograph. Some comments were cruel. Others were written by parents who recognized the particular loneliness of being told, "Maybe next weekend." I read only a handful. I did not want strangers turning my disappointment into permission to hate my son. They knew 58 seconds of his life. I knew the boy who once slept on the floor beside my bed when I had pneumonia. And the man who had slowly trained himself to believe there would always be another chance. My phone displayed 112 notifications, including 27 missed calls. When Colin called again, I answered. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about the $720,000? Are you asking about my retirement?" I said. "Or the money?" Silence answered first. "I should have been there," he finally said. "Yes. But if I had known." "Known what?" He stopped. The question had trapped the truth before he could disguise it. Brooke took the phone. "Elaine, this has become completely unfair. People are attacking us. That camera made it look like Colin abandoned you, so you gave his place to someone else. The camera recorded an empty chair. It did not book your flight." She exhaled sharply. "You could have warned us that someone was getting $720,000. Owen was nominated 3 months ago, before your Scottsdale package existed. I did not select him. An independent board did. But you submitted his name. Because he earned the nomination." Brooke's voice hardened. "You chose another woman's son over your own. Colin was never competing for that grant. It was not family money. And it was never his inheritance." Colin came back onto the line. "So even if I had attended, Owen still would have received it?" "Yes." Another silence followed, different from the first. This one carried the collapse of a story he had told himself. That one missed ceremony had cost him a fortune. "You didn't lose $720,000. I said. "You lost sight of why you should have been there." Brooke began saying the trip had been her client's idea. But Colin interrupted. "No, you suggested it. I booked the flight. Mom invited me, and I chose not to go." It was not yet an apology. But it was the first honest sentence he had spoken. George leaned toward my phone. "Your mother never asked for much," he said. "That was never permission to give her nothing." "Anger fades," I said. "Disappointment settles deeper because love remains." Colin's breathing changed. "We're coming home." I did not ask him to come. I did not tell him to stay away. Colin and Brooke caught the last flight from Phoenix and reached Columbus close to midnight. George had gone to bed, but I remained in the living room with Colin's place card on the coffee table. Headlights swept across the curtains. Their SUV stopped in our driveway. Colin stepped out slowly. Brooke closed her door with the force of someone arriving to defend herself. I opened the door before Colin could knock. He stood beneath the porch light with his shoulders rounded, his travel clothes wrinkled from the flight. Brooke stood half a step behind him, still wearing the polished expression she used when entering a difficult business meeting. "Come in," I said. The living room looked exactly as it had the last time Colin visited, George's recliner beside the fireplace, family photographs along the wall, and the quilt my mother made folded over the couch. Colin studied the room as though he had expected time to rearrange it for him. "I haven't been here in a while," he said. "Almost 3 years." His eyes lifted sharply. "That long?" I nodded. The surprise on his face hurt almost as much as the absence itself. Colin had not been counting the months because he believed our relationship remained safely where he had left it. I had counted every holiday, every unused plate, and every promise that dissolved before reaching the calendar. Brooke placed her handbag beside her chair but did not remove her coat. "We need to clear up what happened today," she said. "People think Colin abandoned you and lost some kind of inheritance. The grant was never an inheritance. Owen was selected for work he had already done. But you created the fund." "I helped create it. I did not own it." Brooke opened her mouth again, but Colin raised one hand. "Mom, I'm sorry." I had imagined those words throughout the flight that brought him home. Hearing them did not produce the relief I expected. "I believe you're sorry," I said. "I don't know what you're sorry for." His brow tightened. "Are you sorry because you hurt me? Or because strangers watched you do it?" Colin looked toward the coffee table. His place card lay between us. "I don't know," he admitted. "It was painful, but it was honest." I went to the spare bedroom and returned with the 3 storage boxes. George appeared in the hallway, awakened by our voices. He did not take over the conversation. He lowered himself into his recliner and waited. I placed the first box at Colin's feet. "This is not a bill," I said. "Your father and I never wanted repayment. It is the life behind everything you thought simply appeared." Inside were statements from the 529 plan we opened when Colin was 4. Tuition invoices showing what remained after his scholarships, and cancelled checks for textbooks and housing. Beneath those lay the record of our contribution to his first down payment, the temporary loan guarantee George had signed, and receipts from the wedding. The papers recorded priorities, not poverty. Colin's future came before our postponed comforts. Colin held a tuition statement in both hands. I thought the scholarship covered almost everything. It covered enough to make the rest possible. He found a letter offering me the Texas promotion. Attached was my written refusal. "You turned this down because of me?" "Because moving during your junior year would have taken you from a program where you were thriving. It was our decision, not a debt you owe." The second box contained photographs rather than numbers. One showed me studying after midnight while Colin slept across 2 kitchen chairs. Another showed George repairing our roof with a borrowed nail gun. There were state park campsites, homemade birthday cakes, my old station wagon, and schedules marked with overtime shifts. Brooke's expression softened, but she remained silent. Colin asked why we had never told him. I said love should not arrive with an invoice attached. But silence had its own cost. By hiding every difficult choice, we had allowed gratitude to become optional. George and I had wanted to give our son roots without making him feel their weight. We had never considered that weight was also how people learned what held them upright. The third box held no financial records. It contained the person Colin had once been. I gave him a Mother's Day essay written in uneven elementary school print. "My mom never misses anything important." Under it was a folded note from when he was 12. "When you're old, I'll be the one who shows up for you." Colin pressed his thumb over the words. "I meant this." "I know." "What happened to me?" "Nothing happened all at once. You became busy. I made every absence painless for you. Your father and I hid every sacrifice because we wanted you to feel safe." Somewhere along the way, safety began to look like entitlement. George lowered his eyes. "We protected you too well," he said. Colin began to cry, not the embarrassed tears of a man exposed online, but the quieter grief of someone meeting a lost version of himself. Then someone knocked softly at the front door. Owen stood on the porch holding a cardboard box from a neighborhood restaurant. "I'm sorry," he said when he saw Colin and Brooke behind me. "I didn't know you had company." He began to step backward. "Please stay," Colin said. Owen entered cautiously. He had changed out of his suit, but the exhaustion of the day remained in his face. He lifted the box. "I brought chicken soup, bread, and apple pie. I figured everyone forgot to eat." Without asking, he carried the food to the kitchen. Colin followed and watched Owen take bowls from the correct cabinet, press the coffee maker switch twice, and place George's tea bag beside an empty mug without adding sugar. Those were not the movements of a visitor. Owen noticed George's tremor and never made him feel diminished. "How often do you come here?" Colin asked. Owen glanced at me. "Every few weeks. More after your dad's stroke." "You've been looking after my parents." "They looked after me first." There was no accusation in Owen's voice. That made the truth harder for Colin to avoid. We gathered around the kitchen table. George joined us slowly, and Owen moved a chair without trying to help him sit. Brooke remained standing near the doorway. Colin placed his ceremony card on the table. "Did you know what was going to happen?" "I knew I was under review. I didn't know the decision or the amount." "Did you ever think I was a terrible son?" Owen considered the question. "I thought you believed you had unlimited time." Colin looked down. "I lost my mother at 19. Owen said. "For years, I was angry at people who still had parents and acted as though visiting them could always wait. Then I realized anger made me unfair. I don't know your marriage, your work, or every reason you stayed away. I only know tomorrow is a promise none of us gets to make." Owen continued carefully. "I never came here to take your place." Colin touched the edge of the place card. "You didn't take it. I'm the one who kept leaving it empty." Brooke crossed her arms. "So now everyone gets to decide Colin is selfish and Owen is the perfect son?" "No one said that," I answered. "They don't need to. That's what this entire night is designed to prove." I asked her to sit. She refused, but her anger began to crack. She told us about the house her parents lost when she was 11. The furniture placed on the curb, and the months she spent sleeping in her aunt's dining room. Money was the difference between having a door and having nowhere to close one. She said, "When I saw that headline, all I could think was that Colin had lost security." Her confession did not excuse the way she had spoken to me, but it changed the shape of her anger. Beneath the expensive coat and carefully managed life was still an 11-year-old girl watching strangers carry away her bed. I could feel compassion for that child without surrendering my boundaries to the adult she had become. "Fear explains why the money mattered to you," I said. "It does not make the money yours." Brooke blinked rapidly. "You always act as though you need nothing." I made that mistake for years. But my silence did not give either of you permission to stop asking. Brooke turned toward Colin. "We should leave." He shook his head. "You suggested Scottsdale. I booked it. I chose the trip. I'm not going to blame you so I can feel innocent." Her face changed. "Whose side are you on?" "The truth's." Brooke picked up her handbag. Colin offered to arrange a hotel near the airport, but he did not follow her outside. She left without slamming the door this time. No one celebrated her departure. I wanted Colin to follow her long enough to make certain she reached the hotel safely. He texted her the reservation and waited until she confirmed her arrival. Staying with us was not a declaration that his marriage no longer mattered. It was the first time he had refused to repair one relationship by abandoning another. Owen served the soup. George broke the bread. 4 people sat at a table carrying 4 different kinds of grief. Healing did not begin with a perfect apology. It began with passing bowls and allowing silence to remain. Colin eventually asked, "When was the last time we ate together like this?" "Thanksgiving," I said. "Last year?" "Nearly 3 years ago." George looked at him. "Coming home once matters. Coming back is what rebuilds trust." The next morning, my phone rang at 7. "How are you feeling today, Mom?" Colin asked. The fish deserved a day without his opinions. Colin watched the water for a long time. After Dad's stroke, every visit felt like a countdown. He said, "I kept seeing what I was going to lose. Staying busy was easier. Avoiding grief does not prevent it." I said, "It only makes you miss the time before it arrives." He nodded. "I'm ashamed. Forgiveness can begin in one night. Trust returns through 100 ordinary days." 3 months later, Owen asked Colin to help at East River's Regional Robotics Showcase. Colin promised to transport equipment and assist students with presentations. On Friday evening, an important client demanded a Saturday meeting. The old Colin would have called Owen with a reasonable explanation. Instead, he asked a colleague to lead the meeting and arrived at East River before the students. He loaded equipment, repaired a damaged display board, and spent 4 hours listening to teenagers explain machines he barely understood. He never mentioned the client. Owen told me later. That mattered more than if Colin had told me himself. He began using his professional contacts to locate donated components and safe transportation for competitions. He offered time and access, not a large check designed to purchase absolution. At first, Owen remained polite and guarded. Colin did not complain. He understood that Owen had spent years watching promises dissolve. So he kept the commitments no one applauded, returning calls, checking safety forms, and arriving when he said he would. Gradually, Owen stopped addressing him as Mr. Parker. Meanwhile, the foundation completed its agreements with East River. Owen paid down part of his student debt with the educator honorarium and replaced his dangerous truck with a modest used one. The first time he drove it to our house, he apologized for the heated seats. "Comfort is not a moral failure," I reminded him. Brooke and Colin lived separately for several months. They entered counseling rather than making a quick decision out of anger. Colin refused to blame her for his distance from us. Brooke struggled with that because accepting his responsibility forced her to examine her own. One afternoon, she came to my house alone. She wore no business coat and carried no folder. She did not mention the grant. "I made your retirement about what I thought we had lost," she said. "I'm sorry." I believed she meant it. But belief was not the same as restored closeness. "I understand why money frightens you," I said, "but I won't let that fear decide what I owe you." She accepted the boundary without arguing. Brooke later offered to conduct a free financial literacy workshop for the families in Owen's program. The first session covered credit, emergency savings, and avoiding predatory loans. She did not put her company logo on the materials. Her change remained unfinished. So did Colin's. So did mine. Healing, I learned, was not the moment everyone became good. It was the period during which people kept choosing honesty after the dramatic reason to change had passed. Almost 1 year after my retirement, an envelope arrived from East River. Inside was an invitation to the opening of the Ruth Bennett Robotics and Mentorship Center. The new Robotics Center occupied the renovated East Wing of East River Technical High School. Sunlight moved across polished worktables, new computers, mobile tool cabinets, and shelves of carefully labeled components. Near Owen's office sat the battered notebook he had used during his first year of teaching. He kept it there so new equipment would never make him forget the days when his students built robots from discarded motors. George and I arrived early. He still used his cane, but his steps had become steadier. Students wearing blue program shirts guided families through the laboratory. Retired technicians from North Star stood beside engineers, electricians, and machinists who had volunteered to mentor them. The grant had already funded transportation, summer stipends, and the first group of scholarship recipients. It had not transformed Owen into a celebrity. It had simply allowed good work to stop surviving from crisis to crisis. On one wall, students painted hands passing a light forward. Beneath them were Ruth's words from a safety manual: "What we save belongs partly to tomorrow." Grief arrived, but it no longer emptied me. Brooke stood at a table near the entrance, helping parents understand financial aid forms. She and Colin were attending counseling and spending time together again, but neither described their marriage as fixed. I had accepted her apology without pretending trust had fully returned. That was enough for the present. When I entered the auditorium, Colin was arranging 4 chairs in the front row. One place card read George Parker. The next read Elaine Parker. Beside mine was Colin Parker. The fourth read Owen Bennett. Colin looked up. I wanted to make sure you didn't have to wonder who was coming. You're early. I'm learning. Owen opened the ceremony by speaking about Ruth. He did not describe her as a saint. He remembered her impatience with unsafe shortcuts, her terrible singing, and the way she could make a frightened person feel capable. My mother saved one life in a factory fire. He said, Elaine taught me that a life saved should become a life shared. This center is how that kindness keeps moving. Several students then met the mentors who would guide them through apprenticeships, college applications, and skilled trade certifications. One girl showed me a small competition robot and said Owen had told her I was the reason the room existed. No, I said. A great many people decided you deserved a room. Her name was Maya. She told me her mother worked nights and could not afford competition travel before the grant. Now Maya planned to study mechanical engineering. Watching her explain the robot, I understood that generosity is rarely a straight line between giver and receiver. It becomes a network of strangers carrying one another across distances they may never see. Colin did not ask for the microphone. He did not turn his apology into a public performance. He spent the reception carrying boxes, introducing students to potential mentors, and making certain George had a chair whenever he needed one. After the crowd thinned, Colin found me beside Ruth's photograph. Thank you for leaving the door open, he said. I left it open, I answered. You still had to walk through it. I thought you wanted me to become Owen. Never. I wanted you to become the man you once promised yourself you would be. His eyes filled. He wrapped his arms around me. Not with the desperate force of the night he returned from Scottsdale, but with the steadiness of someone who intended to remain. George placed one hand on Colin's shoulder. Owen hesitated until Colin pulled him into the embrace. Brooke stood nearby, giving us the space to finish before quietly joining us. No one had replaced anyone. Family had not become a prize awarded to the most deserving person. It had become a circle widened by gratitude, truth, and the willingness to return. Forgiveness had not erased the missed dinners, the unanswered calls, or the humiliating loneliness of that retirement banquet. Those memories remained part of me. But memory did not have to remain a courtroom. It could become a teacher. I could remember what happened without requiring Colin to live forever inside the worst thing he had done. The $720,000 had repaired no relationship. It had only illuminated what was already there: Owen's service, Colin's absence, Brooke's fear, George's patience, and my habit of hiding every need. Money created the headline. Truth created the first change. Time rebuilt trust. Humility brought us back to the same room. Love kept the door open without dragging anyone across the threshold. Before we left, I looked once more at the 4 chairs in the front row. None was empty. If someone has spent a lifetime showing up for you, do not wait for an empty chair to understand what their presence was worth.